Today, my guest is Professor Dana Minbaeva. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with her. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Dana as a person, Professor Minbaeva as a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I'll skip many of her accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Minbaeva is an AIB fellow. She has published over 50 articles, book chapters, reports, received several national and international awards. She also received the 2013 JIBS Decade Award. She serves as an area editor at JIBS and sits on the review boards of Academy of Management Review, Journal of Management, and Journal of World Business. She is also the founder and the director of the Human Capital Analytics Group at Copenhagen Business School. She has taught in Kazakhstan, Russia, Lithuania, Kyrgyzstan, Finland, and Germany. Thank you, Dana, for joining us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the nice introduction.
Thanks. First question about your background. What did you want to become when you were a child?
A teacher. When I think about my childhood and what kind of things we were playing with my cousins and brothers over the long summer breaks that we had back then, I was always a teacher. School teacher, or if we were playing something else, like for example, a setup of the cities, and people would work in different places, and we would meet in the evenings, and kind of I was always a teacher.
Dana, I looked at your webpage, and you have a very fascinating story about how you accomplished so many things early on. Where did you grow up? I want you to say those things eventually, but where did you grow up?
So I'm a child of the Soviet Union. So I was born in Almaty, Kazakhstan, at the time when Kazakhstan was a part of Soviet Empire. So you could say that I'm originally Kazakh, so 100% ethnic Kazakh. But because I was brought up during the Soviet Union time, the Kazakh language, history, values were suppressed, and we were all supposed to speak Russian. So actually, that's why some people wonder when they look at my CV, it says native Kazakh as a language, but mother is a Russian as a language, because that's the language I speak to my mother. That's the language I speak to my child. So as a 100% ethnic Kazakh, unfortunately, I'm not fluent in my own language, and that is a shame that my generation will carry forever. You could say right now, after 1991, when the Republic of Kazakhstan was established, and now the language is really coming back. And you see, like, for example, my niece and nephews, they are absolutely bilingual in Russian and Kazakh. They all study, of course, English. By the way, Turkish is extremely popular language, especially in the south of Kazakhstan. So this is normal that people would speak, or especially younger generation would speak 3-4 languages. Chinese, equally important and equally popular. So, but when I was growing up, it was Russian. And that was, of course, unfortunate situation. I spoke a little bit of a Kazakh with my grandparents when I spent those long summers in their houses. But unfortunately, that's not sufficient to keep the language alive.
Interesting. So can you remember the first moment of awareness between foreign versus domestic?
Foreign versus domestic in the former Soviet Union. Well, I guess that's always been there, because it was always us versus them, right? Us being good guys, obviously, Soviet people versus them being bad guys, the rest of the world. So there was always this awareness between domestic and foreign. Domestic was good and foreign was bad. And I think, so it was always this continuous fight, and something us against them, and us telling the truth and they're lying. And for example, if you remember there was a very famous game in ice hockey in 1980 on the Winter Olympics between USSR and the United States of America, that actually USA won. But we were told that it was incorrect, and there was a replay, and then USSR, Soviet Union, actually won. It took me so many years to figure out the truth. Equally, we were told that Laika, the space dog, she came back alive, and she was shown on TV, and we all saw her, coming back from the space, etc. And then suddenly, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I found out that the poor dog actually died. She burned in space and she never came back. So that foreign against domestic, I think, was present for a long time in my life. Gradually, foreign became something that we didn't have. We haven't seen, we didn't have access. And in terms of kind of exposure, then in summer 1986, because I was very active in the young communist organization, so we were given a possibility to take a tour to Romania and Bulgaria. And for me, that was completely foreign. There was something that, they had everything, and it was so different. It was full of colors and full of things that we never had. So to me, that was my largest, biggest exposure to foreign everything in my childhood.
This is fascinating. And, history is told and retold and written and rewritten a couple of times, depending on who's writing it. Okay, I understand you want to be a teacher, you want to get into academia, but PhD, especially in IB. How did that happen?
So let me just go a little bit back. I wanted to be a teacher as a child, but when I graduated from the school and was, at the time when I had to choose university, back then we had 10 grades, and then you go to university and spend 5 or 6 years, right? So at that time, my mother told me, if you want to have a job that pays you more than 100 rubles, you have to go to the Polytechnical Institute. So my dream of being a teacher disappeared, because I actually, after graduation, I was admitted to the Karaganda Polytechnical University, and I spent 6 years studying engineering, mining engineering, physics and mathematics, and resistance of materials, and you name it. So lots of things around the mining engineers. Graduated after 6 years, and at that time, Soviet Union collapsed. So I'm standing there with a diploma in highest education from the Polytechnical University with a degree of mining engineer, and there are no jobs. There is nothing. There is no economy, because mining industry collapsed immediately, given the heavy investments, right? Besides, at that time, Kazakhstan found oil around the Caspian Sea region, and all foreign investment was directed there. So had nothing and no prospects of continuing as an engineer. I even went to study accounting, because accountants were kind of on a high demand. And after searching for jobs and constantly receiving, rejections and no's, and yeah, it was very, very tough period, actually. At certain point, I thought that, okay, it's time now to decide whether I want to continue my existence, just going along and see what life offers, or if I want to do things differently, I really, really have to change something. And I decided for the latter, and I decided to learn English. I was 24 at the time, so I thought, okay, I heard this announcement about possibility to take MBA in Kazakhstan, but MBA taught by the foreign professors. So there was a project supported by USAID as well as EU TASIS. So they would bring foreign professors for a semester, and then we'll teach kind of North American style. To get there, I had to pass GMAT, TOEFL, IELTS, you name it, right? So obviously lots of tests. English language, needed to learn that one. And then I had to earn 300 or find 300 American dollars to pay for the first year admission. So to me, $300 at that time was like, I don't know, $3 million right now. So it's just unattainable. I mean, there is no way nobody has it. You know, your parents, they don't have it. Everybody is kind of, you cannot imagine this feeling of emptiness, that there is no future, there is no past. It's some kind of a present right now, and there is vacuum because nothing is happening. Well, anyway, something was happening, and then I decided to grasp that chance. At that time, Kazakhstan introduced own currency, tenge, and because of the, you could say, technology was not that sophisticated at that time. In the city where National Bank was located, the exchange rates are giving, you know, in the evening, let's say, at the end of the day. And then in the city where I was living at that time, which is approximately 1,200 kilometers north, the exchange rate come into the place at 12 o'clock next morning. However, there was a train leaving, you know, the capital at 8 p.m. or something like this, and arriving into the other city in early morning. So that gave us a window of 3 hours, right, to actually sell the currency on the previous rate. Basically, market inefficiencies. I was speculating on the differences in exchange rate created by the absence of telecommunication and technology. So that's what I did, Ilgas. I basically got myself, I don't know, at that time, that was what they called Walkman, I think, put English in my tapes in there, and traveled back and forth between these two cities. Sometimes margins were like, I don't know, $5, sometimes $2, sometimes $10 in a good in good times. But over a period of 3-4 months, I found those, or I earned those $300, and I guess English was sufficient to pass the tests, and that's how I came into this education. So this is how we went from teacher to mining engineer, and now an MBA student, right? When I got into MBA, I thought I am going to be a finance person. I'm going to work in bank, because that's where, you know, that's where you find all the money. That's where the, you know, that's where you really make it. So 2 years, again, studied everything on the financial specialization, as well as banking, corporate finance, international finance, monetary banking, you name it. And then the very last semester, I found one book in our library. It was called Principles of Management. I don't even remember the author. I remember it was like green and white, like this big, and, you know, kind of old. And I just started reading it, and it was so fascinating. So I graduated from that, from my MBA, this dream to become a management scholar. So teacher, mining engineer, MBA in finance, management scholar. But again, and again, there was this chance and opportunity to get enrolled into the junior faculty development program that was supported by EU TASIS. And the next 4 years, between 96 and 2000, I spent between Kazakhstan and Europe. For example, studying in Vienna University in the summer, coming back and teaching, spending semester at CBS, coming back and teaching. And then in 99, I got myself into pre-doctoral studies at HEC. And at that time, they told me that your pre-doctorate could be in English, but your doctorate should be in French. And I thought, are you kidding me? I just learned English like 5 years ago. So it all ended up that a friend of mine said, hey, there is a position in your field at CBS. I took what I did at HEC, I sent it to CBS. They said, come over. I came to CBS, and apparently that position, that PhD scholarship that I had a kind of actually was placed within international business, because that was about knowledge transfer in multinationals. So I became a PhD student at CBS. I joined a North IB doctoral program in international business. And ever since, I am an IB scholar.
Fascinating. I mean, normally I ask, something that's not on your CV that people will find interesting. I don't know if I should ask it on top of this. Can you top what you have just told by something coming up with even further interesting?
Well, there is another entrepreneurial kind of swing that I did because I had to find payments for my second year. Remember, I earned for the first year I got from this market, kind of this currency exchange speculations, but I had to find another $300 to pay for the second one. And at that time, I was located in that big city, Almaty, and the issue that there was, again, market inefficiencies because there was lots of warehouses, like big placements, and then there were lots of small kiosks. We didn't have, supermarkets at the extent as we have, for example, now, or Kazakhstan has now. So there was this place in between large warehouses and kiosks, and there was like a self-organized market space. So during the summer, I basically engaged into some speculations on that market. And I'm very ashamed of it, but we speculated on vodka and cigarettes because they gave the biggest margin. so that's how I earned 300 to pay for my second year. But I think that was the most extreme entrepreneurial swings in my career, or at least legal, probably.
Super interesting.
I'm not going to tell you anymore because I may come into trouble. We stop the topic here.
No, I mean, this is what we teach in international finance. So this was very interesting. Thank you. What are you most passionate about? I'm
most passionate about things I do. I'm sorry, it's not very concrete answer, but it is, and I couldn't say it is a job. It's about things I do. I'm extremely passionate about interdisciplinary research because I love writing papers with people from different backgrounds, right? I love teaching, particularly when you have that audience that respond, that you have this fantastic dialogue. I love talking to practitioners because I learn more than they do. I love working with AIB because I think we have the most fascinating community in academia. So I guess that's what I'm most passionate about. I'm sorry, no strange stories here.
we will find it. Don't worry. We'll just dig deep and we'll find it. About research, how do you explain your research to people who don't read your work regularly or who are not even in academia? And how do you explain the importance of your research?
I say usually that I help companies to realize that how to become successful from managing their greatest asset, people, and how to do so that those people are satisfied, motivated, engaged. So kind of having this win-win situation. And it's funny you asked how to explain it and I'm sure you tried that as well, Ilgas, because when you explain it in different languages, it really loses, you lose all the terminology and all those shortcuts that we develop in our professional language, so to say. And you have to really go for additional reflection loop to explain it in, for example, I mean, for me in Russian or in Kazakh, and for you, I guess, in Turkish and other languages that we speak. So I often try to put it this way.
It's very interesting, actually. This is not something we discussed. In one other interview, I mentioned it. I tried to explain what we do in resource-based view or transaction cost economics to my father, and it didn't sound important at the time, you know. And I was just making a pure perfect translation. It just didn't sound impressive, and it didn't impress anyone in the audience. It's and they said, like, is this it? Like, is this what you're working on? I said, yeah, this is my life.
Must be something to do with father. So my father is a professor in the inorganic chemistry, and I mean, when I got my PhD, he kept asking, so what is your PhD in area? What is this science area? Because PhD should be in some kind of a science area. And I was saying business administration and economics. No, that's not science. But what is it? So it took him very long to understand what is it exactly. So I don't think he's he's there yet, but these are others, right?
I don't think they will get there. It's just, I think we will get there sooner than they do. About forgotten variables, omitted areas, or neglected areas in international business research, what can you say about what we need to do more in IB research?
So that's kind of a shifting gears from fathers to the neglected variables, I say. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say anything new because I kept saying it for the last decade. I think the problem that we often face in international business is that we assume existence of average individual in an average context. We love averaging individuals, right? Because it's easier to treat all human capital as being, you know, a person, an individual, an average. And equally, we also love averaging the context and say, hey, that's a country, you know, let's label it this one on average. And if you take, for example, Kazakhstan, there is 126 nationalities living. There is a huge difference between, you know, North and the South. And I'm sure you take any country and you will find the greater variance within the national borders and, you know, much more interesting things. But we in IB, we love averaging. And I think that, and it's not just an IB problem. So for example, when I talk to my colleagues in the human resource management or strategic human resource management field, they also do that, right? You know, individual on average have engagement of that and that, right? And that's difficult to act upon, because how can you treat a patient by knowing average temperature in the hospital, right? So average individual in an average context, that's our biggest problem. Yes, I guess the other one that I hope we all could become better is getting closer to practice, and that's also something I'm extremely passionate about. And because there is no such thing as there's nothing more practical than a good theory, and there is nothing more theoretical than a good practice, right? So that real kind of fair treatment and respect between theory and practice, that's something that all of us should become better at.
I want to ask you about the culture of IB scholarship, and we know where we were, and we see there's a progression to something. It's just, well, what is it, and what is going to be the next 5 to 10 years in the field? What's going to be interesting for PhD students to work on, junior faculty to work on? What's in the future for us?
It's difficult to predict the future because you would always be wrong. But I think your beginning of your question was slightly different than the end. So let me start the beginning and then we could come back to the end. Because you asked about the culture of IB. Immediately, I thought about the changes that you know, we are trying to push through the through AIB around the you know, diversity and inclusion. when we look at our organization, we are supposed to be the most diverse. We are supposed to be the most inclusive organizations. Now, we probably are diverse, but we are not using that diversity for anything else. And I think for AIB, the future is in taking responsibility for building the most inclusive organization, bringing the voices in. I recently looked at the AIB leadership data, and not surprisingly, as you might imagine, if we are an organization that's dominated by North American scholars. That may be different of their nationality, but they're all educated and working currently in North America. So institutionally speaking, so to say, it's extremely homogeneous. And and that I think should be changed. And that's something and that's why I ran for the AIB board, and that's my personal agenda for the next for all my period while serving at the AIB board, to make sure that AIB become truly inclusive organizations.
Thank you. About creativity in research. So there's this question on the state of idle curiosity. What does your mind think of? I'm curious about how people come up with creative ideas, creative papers. What's the trick? What leads to creative research?
So to me, creativity in research means interdisciplinarity. I personally, when I say state of wonder, I love finding analogies. And so, observing something which is extremely easy, first to observe and second to understand in, around you, and looking at that through other lenses in order to get certain abstraction, certain generalization, certain kind of idea that in fact creates a perfect analogy with a certain phenomena that we would like to explain. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned earlier, that, for example, my current interdisciplinary project, it's a paper on continuity and change in informal institutions. And I'm writing it with a political science researcher, with a cultural researcher, with a management scholar. And it's extremely interesting and extremely difficult. So somehow, because it's such a complicated topic, in the paper, we actually use an analogy from, first of all, from the biology to look at the 3 types of symbiosis, which is extremely obvious, when we look around ourselves, and then try to bring this analogy in conceptualization of informal institutions and informal networks, relations in them. And then later in the paper, we actually use the analogy from physics when we talk about networks and pipeline, and talk about viscosity, and talk about some of the things that kind of we know, or I still remember from my engineering days, from physics, that describes how fast, for example, water could travel or liquid could travel through pipes. In the case of the paper, how fast change could travel through the pipes of informal networks, right? And that's where I find extremely fascinating, to find that analogy in something that's so obvious and so easy to understand, and so helpful in building explanation of our phenomena.
Interesting. And I said digging deep, right? It was about the mining analogy. That's what I was trying to get.
Here we go.
About advice and mentoring, I'm curious, who had the most impact on your intellectual development when you were going through the PhD program?
So I had 2 PhD supervisors. My main supervisor is Torben Peterson, the established IB scholar, IB fellow, and the secondary supervisor was Nikolai Voss, you could say established strategy scholar, organizational economics. So I have nothing to complain there, right? But you could say the culture of education that we have, for example, in Europe, or for that sake, in fact, everywhere outside of North America, is that PhD supervisors, they, of course, help PhDs to graduate, etc. But there is no such a pardon for being directly. There is not such a babysitting of, for example, placement or taking care of the later career choices. So it's only now it's coming in, I would say. So Torben and Nikolai, of course, as a PhD supervisor, I learned a lot, and I observed them in say their interactions and their dialogues and debates, and that was extremely fulfilling and interesting. And then basically throughout the career, I cannot really point out to one particular individual who really, kind of completely changed my mind and say, okay, from here on. I like to observe different people. Sometimes I choose a mentor for myself, like a secret mentor. That person doesn't even know. So I would listen to his or her, it's actually very often her, speeches or advices, read up a little bit more and follow the interviews. And I learned from that person. Yeah? And then I find someone else who is extremely, fascinating and interesting. I find his or her biography and follow a little bit, watch some videos, etc. So I'm trying to pick up from different people and kind of learning while no one's paying attention. But I'm also had extreme, great opportunities to work with great leaders. My current boss, for example, our CBS president, is extremely inspirational leader, and I'm learning so much from him. So not an individual, but definitely ongoing process of gathering learnings from different people.
Interesting, thank you. About your advice to junior faculty and PhD students, what they should do, what they should not do, what can you say about that?
Maybe I could divide it into two. so that thing about the general for PhD students and junior faculty, I'm often asked this question. Sometimes people also put it like, what would you do differently, right? And when I think about it, I've always tried to encourage, particularly junior faculty and PhD scholars, to aim higher. In the sense that you could say, now that in the introduction you mentioned the JIBS Decade Award paper. That was actually my very first paper which was written, and it wasn't a part of my PhD because I'm one of those dinosaurs who still kind of, at that time, we still wrote we still had the manuscripts, not a paper-based dissertation. So it was a publication, not a part of my PhD. It was my idea, but data were completely different. And when we finalized this paper, it ended up in JIBS, not because I was aiming high, but because one of our co-authors actually, encouraged us to submit that. And I still remember thinking, like, what? No way, it's never going to be published in JIBS. Yeah, and even after my PhD defense, I still needed to, churn or convert manuscript into the papers and publish them. And when I look at my publication list right now, I can see that I didn't even try top journals. I settled for B, or maybe even B-. That also ideas were quite kind of novel at that time. Why would you ask for? Someone may wonder. And thinking about it right now, almost 20 years later, I would say fear. Fear of overreaching, fear of failure, fear of making wrong choice. And in retrospect, I should have talked about it. I should have shared my fear. I should have understood. I should have asked for advice. Or I should have kind of, you would say, accept that without failure, there is no achievement. But that took some years to kind of get over. And if you ask me what my advice would be to PhD student and junior faculty, I would say aim higher, act with ambition. And of course, not ambition alone, but ambition that is coupled with perseverance, hard work, and very strong will, you know, to accept failure, because it will come. And the second part that I also want to mention in here, that's probably to my female colleagues. There is another learning in all this, and it is something that only recently kind of became for me very articulate. I had to learn it by hitting my head over lots of, you know, doors and walls and glass ceilings and all other things. And my learning so far is, and you'll probably find it quite ridiculous, but to me, it took a long time to understand that my biggest challenge, or our biggest challenge, is to stay focused and smile. Be competent and nice at the same time. Because for a woman, competent and nice is really a stumbling combination. If a woman is competent, you know, she's very seldom is regarded as nice. Rather, too ambitious, too pushy, difficult to work with. But if a woman seems really nice, she's probably considered more nice and competent, right? So that combination, being competent and nice, to me is basically do the job, stay focused, and get along with everybody. This is my biggest learning, and that's something that I would definitely advise to, you know, to kind of work on. It's a skill, right? You cannot learn it otherwise than hitting your wall. You're hitting your head against the wall. So kind of work on it throughout the career, because it's going to be so important later on when perhaps one starts thinking about some research leadership challenges in the career.
This is interesting, actually. When I mentioned who my advisors were, who my mentors were, everyone says, oh, these are very nice people. They are very good, nice, kind people. No one said, oh, these people are brilliant. I mean, these people have published most of the top cited research in our field. But the thing that really comes out is how nice they are. It's easier to find technically accurate person, but not a nice person. Thank you so much. Last question. What is one question that I should have asked you but haven't?
One question. Oh, I think, I don't know. Frankly speaking, now that you are really reaching for some additional, you know, diggings, so to say, and I talked to, you know, to some other fellows that you interviewed, and we all agreed that the most difficult question you ask is about regrets and failures. And, you know, these things everyone finds that it's extremely difficult to answer, because, you know, here we are, you know, in professional setting, talking up close and personal. So I was really thinking, you know, when I saw other people's interview, I thought, oh my goodness, that's a tough question. That's an interesting question. At that time, I was not even invited to that conversation. So I was, you know, amazed how, for example, some of the first people we talked to, like Peter Barclay and John Cantwell, you know, tackled that, right? So that's a most difficult question. And now that I'm bringing it forward, you're probably going to ask me.
It seems like so what's your regret? Or what was your biggest regret?
No, Andrew Delius told me that when you asked this question, he said, I have no regrets. And I also thought about it, and I said, do I have regrets? I don't think I have regrets, because whatever failure, whatever mistake, whatever things that happened to me made me who I am today, and made me extremely grateful person for who I am, you know, to the opportunities that I get and people I meet. So no, it was a difficult question that I thought you would ask, and I didn't have an answer. But when I remember when I heard you asking that question for the first time, immediately in my head came a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Do what you feel is right in your heart, because you're going to be criticized anyway. You will be damned if you do, and you'll be damned if you don't." So that was my immediate reaction when I heard you asking these questions, this question to other AIB fellows. So can I keep thinking about that, and maybe we talk later about regrets?
Thank you so much for your time, for this great interview. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it. I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you so much.